Good morning, everyone. For those of you I haven't seen before, Happy New Year. I hope that 2021 is kinder to us all than 2020 has been. This is the first meeting of the Waste Committee for this new year, so we'll plough straight on to, do we have any apologies?
We do, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Susan Emmett, and also apologies from Councillor Atik-O'Rayman.
Okay. Oh, is that noted by everyone? I shall take your silence. Shout up if anyone's got anything else, any more to add to that, or I shall take your silence as consent to it. Item 2 is Chair's announcements and any urgent business. I haven't been notified of any. Item 3, declarations of interest. Members will know that it's the usual form and the usual process for declaring those. Item 4 is minutes of the Greater Manchester Waste and Recycling Committee of the 14th of October, and I think Councillor Quinn is going to move those for us.
Yeah, I'm happy to move those minutes. Thank you, Chair. There's a true and correct record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Is there anyone that wants to second that?
I'll second.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If you're all in favour of those as a true and accurate record,
yeah.
No one's shouting no, then brilliant. Thank you very much for that. We shall move on to item 5, which is the work programme for 2020.
Sorry, Chair. Oh. Sorry, Chair. It's Councillor Yasmin Tor from Oldham. I was having problem connecting my laptop. Can I give apology for Councillor Atik-O'Rayman from Oldham?
Yeah, thank you. We've already noted that, but no, brilliant. And we hope that he makes a swift recovery and send him our best regards. Moving on then to David Taylor is taking us through the work programme, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the report is for noting. It sets out the work programme for the remainder of this municipal year. I think the main item to note is scheduled for the next meeting in April, which would be a substantive overview of the National Waste and Resources Strategy consultations. That is very much contingent upon DEFRA releasing those documents in March, which they have said they will do. What we don't know yet is whether that will be the beginning or the end of March. So that may dictate whether we can bring that report through in April. Otherwise, the report is for noting.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts that they want to make on this report?
Chair.
Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, well, as David just mentioned, on the English waste strategy, do we talk about that now, or is it later on? I just want to make a few comments, please.
While we're here, I think.
Yes. Well, firstly, I think we need to congratulate the officers for their work, because if we go back historically, we were talking about 4 extra bins in Greater Manchester, which majority, well, I think all of us thought was unacceptable. And I think the DEFRA have seen sense on that. Also on other things like commonality of bins, which would, again, would cause chaos as far as I'm concerned. But the only thing that does worry me is that the government seem intent on weekly food collections, and that is an extra cost to us. And I think, we need to emphasise, and I know the government has said there will be no extra cost, but going forward, there needs to be no extra cost to the residents of Greater Manchester, because we'll need more bins. We will probably need more crews to do that. And then there's the question of anaerobic digestion plants. If the government can down that road and insisting, we have them, and in the past we've had them and they didn't work. So I think that what we need to do is put on record that for the future, the government have to pay for this. I mean, the fact is that everybody is catching up with what Greater Manchester are doing, and we've got a system that works and it doesn't need fixing. But if the government insists on it, it has to be at no extra cost going forward to the residents of Greater Manchester. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Quinn. David, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I think the point about funding we did raise with DEFRA in the discussions that we had with them, and the response that came back was reiterating the government reference to any additional operating costs that come about from the strategy. So, for example, in the case of separate collection of food waste, if that were to entail additional vehicles, additional crews, new treatment technology, then those additional costs would be covered through the new burdens regime. That was all the information that we could get, and the DEFRA officials were basically restating the position that the government had put out in the previous consultation documents. So what we will see in the March consultations will be more detail on how they anticipate that working, and we will have the opportunity in our consultation response to reaffirm the point that Councillor Quinn has just made, that there will be significant additional costs and those costs need to be covered.
Did they explain? Can I ask a question, Chair?
Yeah, who is that?
Dave Lancaster.
I've got Councillor Garrido has expressed he wants to comment next. So can I line up Councillor Garrido and then Councillor Lancaster, just have you jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the food recycling, I mean, obviously in Salford we already do that. I noticed in Oldham, in fact, they've got a campaign running at the moment. So how many of our local authorities don't do it? Because clearly, if we're already doing it in Salford and Oldham is in the process of doing it, clearly there's going to be no additional cost as far as those local authorities are concerned. So where are we up to with the other local authorities?
So all 9 of our waste collection authorities collect food waste with garden waste from the household. Now, all of you will be collecting that material in a wheeled bin with the garden waste, and those are either done on a fortnightly or a weekly basis. The DEFRA view of life is that what they would like to see is a completely separate collection of food waste done on a weekly basis. The rationale for that is that they believe you will capture more food waste from the household if it is kept entirely separate and collected separate. So that's the basis for this. Our view, and based on the waste composition analysis that we've got, is we're already capturing similar amounts of food as you would do from a separate collection, because in most cases the districts are providing householders with a caddy to put their food waste in, and it's that then gets emptied into the green bin. So this is an area that we will be responding on in the consultations to get to the bottom of why they believe that they will actually get a higher yield of food from going down that separate weekly collection. So to answer Councillor Garrido's question, all 9 districts collect food waste in the same way as Salford.
Okay, so is it then that we're saying that the caddies aren't acceptable? Is the government actually saying, we need some other method other than the caddy?
Well, they would still want you to have a caddy, but then what you would need is a dedicated collection vehicle just for that food waste, which is collected in the caddies, and that food waste would then need to be treated differently to how we currently do it. So it wouldn't be through in-vessel composting, it would potentially have to go through some form of anaerobic digestion process.
Okay, and sorry, just to follow up on that, Chair, and what's the benefit of actually having it separate like that?
So the benefits that DEFRA believe, firstly, they think it will separate additional food from the waste stream, so you capture more. The other side of it is potentially if you use anaerobic digestion, you can use the biogas which is created to either generate electricity or produce a biofuel, which could then be used in vehicles. So from a carbon generation perspective, there is a benefit in doing this. That needs to be weighed up against a significant amount of additional cost, and also the fact that you do need somewhere to actually spread the digestate which is produced. And if you're looking at farmland, the requirement for that digestate is only over typically 3 to 6 months of the year. So you need to have the ability to store this material as well. So it does create a number of issues which need to be overcome.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm just struggling to unmute there. Councillor Lancaster, you wanted to come in.
I think you've answered my question, and the question I was asking, and not every, is every authority on the caddy for the green waste then, or are some using just the pink bin or the green bin?
From memory, I think the majority provide a caddy, which can be emptied into the wheeled bin. I'll ask Michelle to send around after the meeting the breakdown of exactly which district collects what material on what frequency using what bin and what capacity bin, and then you've got the complete overview.
We've just done a pilot in Salford where we to increase the recycling, we've asked people to collect the food waste in caddies, and be delivered caddies to every household. That's had a substantial increase in the people which are putting food waste out. So I'm not convinced that the mixing of food waste with garden waste is so important to the government. If the real reason they want it is increased tonnage of food waste, then surely that's the line we should be arguing for, which is caddy collection.
I agree, and their view is based on analysis which has been undertaken by Hwrc, where they've measured the weight of the material collected in a weekly food waste in a caddy and then compared that with food waste in the garden bin. But what they aren't necessarily taking account of is when you put food waste in a garden wheeled bin, some of the moisture from the food comes out and is lost and mixed in with the garden waste. When they then do the waste composition analysis to pick the food waste out of that garden waste to see what's there, it's actually lost weight because of the moisture. So they're not comparing on a like for like basis. So again, this will be part of our consultation response to demonstrate that the way we are doing things is probably capturing a very high amount of the food which is available anyway.
Could I just raise one other, Chair, if I may?
Yeah, sure.
I'm still not convinced. If we actually made the decision to have a caddy, which would be a weekly collection, it's unlikely, in my opinion, that local authorities will carry on with a weekly collection with the green bin. So the residents are not going to be happy about going to a 4-weekly, say, collection or 3-weekly collection for green waste to accommodate food waste being taken on a weekly basis. Or is that unfair question?
No, I think that is one of the consequences of this, but the focus of DEFRA is very much on that food waste element and frequency of collection of garden waste. They aren't considering, and they would leave that to a local decision.
Okay, thanks.
I think I had Councillor Besford wanted to come in on this item as well.
Thank you, Chair. So just for clarification, it seems that the government are trying to recommend a solution to a problem that we haven't got in Greater Manchester, and that given that we are already commingling between food and garden waste, by separating those things out potentially means we've got an extra bin and an extra round of collections that need to be picked up, which feels to me that that's going to put an additional environmental pressure on Greater Manchester and additional cost as well, whether it's met by the government or whether it's met by Greater Manchester. So I wonder, David, you sent a briefing note round in December that specifically mentioned technical, economic, environmental, practicable assessments, TEEPs. Now, it would feel to me that this recommendation from the national strategy would be both detrimental to our environmental and our economic footprint that we already have. So I'm sure you're going to factor these things in, but just is there an opportunity to overturn or to overrule any forced separation of garden and food waste through that? And the second point is, another reason why I'm worried about separating garden and food waste is that some authorities elsewhere in England charge for garden waste collections, and I wouldn't want to leave open an opportunity where we might end up being tempted to charge residents for collecting garden waste by following this strategy, which is something that we don't need to introduce because we're managing it well already.
Okay, so on the first point with the TEEP assessments, this is potentially an area which could be justified through TEEP to carry on as we are. Part of the March consultations is going to be further guidance around how TEEP will work, and also what the balance of the assessment will be between the economic factors and the environmental factors. So we know from the analysis that's been done, from an economic perspective, the current option that we have of co-collecting garden and food IVC treatment is the lowest cost. And we know that there will be a fairly hefty uplift in costs if we move down the separate food waste side of things. But the separate food waste with anaerobic digestion does appear to have a carbon benefit. So what we are going to look at is further analysis of any changes to collection systems and the disposal side of it compared to our current systems, and look at those from a financial as well as a carbon basis, and that will then be used to determine whether we can use that information as part of our TEEP assessment to justify carrying on as we are. So that work is being undertaken at the moment through WRM and Wood, and Paul will talk more about that later on when we get through to the bio-waste reports. So I think, yes, TEEP is a potential opportunity. The strategy and DEFRA are fairly quiet on the charging for garden waste point. And again, we need to see the March consultations to see if there is any further information on there about what their views are on that option.
Okay, can I remind members, if you are not being invited to speak, just to flick your cameras off? I think we were in the preamble at the start, but some of us missed that. I've got Councillor Quinn and I've got Councillor Akbar that wanted to come in.
Thanks, David. Is there any more updates on the deposit return scheme or the extended producer responsibility, i.e. a plastic tax? Because obviously, I mean, I think a deposit return scheme is the right way to go around things, but it could have implications because we do sell obviously our materials to get money back. Thanks, Chair.
So both of those items will be included in the March consultations. The indications from the conversation with DEFRA were that they will be pressing ahead with the deposit return scheme. So one area that we have identified with them is the potential for that to impact upon our own contractual arrangements. If less packaging material is coming through the Suez contracts, what will the impact of that be? So they have asked us to include that in our consultation response. And it's a similar position with the extended producer responsibility. That is still very much at the centre of their proposals around packaging waste. And it is that which is also going to be used to fund any of the collection or disposal costs related to changes to packaging. And again, it will be more detail in the March consultations.
Thanks, David. Councillor Akbar, I think Michelle Whitfield, who's got the next item up, has suggested that we perhaps cover your questions within her piece, if that's agreeable to you.
Yeah, I'm just, I mean, that's the comms side of it. I just want to ask David in terms of, you know, obviously, I think the government have said that they're going to fund, well, they'll say that, whether they're going to fund some of the changes that happened through the this consultation. In terms of home composting, are they looking at saying encouraging more home composting across the country to kind of reduce food waste?
Within the strategy, it's still based around the waste hierarchy, and they would see waste prevention as the primary point of that strategy. The consultations have been quiet on that. The expectation is that local authorities would continue to promote waste prevention, home composting being an element of that, but there is nothing specific about extra measures that you should take.
Okay. And then I just have Steve Adshead who wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I couldn't get into the meeting, so I missed quite, I think it's about 15 or so minutes before I could get into it. So I'm not quite sure on the item on the agenda, but I know this item comes up twice. I've been following some of the comments on it, and I think the query I had in relation to the food waste was actually how they actually suggest that by having a separate waste stream, that it would actually collect more. I mean, I don't know what every authority does in terms of supplying bags, but in Trafford we do supply the food waste bags that go into the caddies. I think in some authorities you may have to buy them, and I think there's scope to pick up more, I believe, so they tell us, but I'm not sure how separating that into a stream away from garden waste would actually generate more of that food waste. I'm not particularly clear. I mean, obviously know that each authority is responsible for the, should it go down that line, each authority is responsible for the size of the caddies. The caddies we currently use, I think if that did happen, wouldn't be big enough. I think certainly when you see some of the green bins where the food waste bags go into, which obviously can be sealed, then you actually wonder actually a small caddy wouldn't be, in many of them would not be big enough. So obviously that'd be a matter for authority. But the question I suppose there is actually just how do we, if we believe that it actually will increase the amount being collected as opposed to what we use now, because I think it's not a bad system we have at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, so I think our view is very similar to yours in that in providing a caddy and liners, as you and most other districts do, you're already capturing a high yield of food. Whereas it comes back to the point I made earlier about the way in which Hwrc, who advised DEFRA, have measured the capture of food waste. When they take the material from a separate weekly food waste collection and they weigh it, that gives them quite a high capture rate. What they're then doing is comparing that against food waste that has been put in a garden waste bin, and that food waste will have lost moisture into the garden waste, so it weighs less, and they're not comparing on a like-for-like basis. So the analysis that we've had done shows that the capture rates we're getting with the systems we've got are actually very similar to what you would get from the DEFRA model of a separate weekly food waste using a caddy. And these are the points we need to get home strongly within our consultation response.
Okay, thank you for that, David. If there's no further questions, we shall move on to item 6, which Michelle Whitfield's going to take us through, which is the Communications and Behavioural Change Plan.
Hello. Hopefully you can see me. I've turned my camera off. Yes, so hi, I'm Michelle Whitfield. Thanks, Councillor. So I'm going to talk you through the report that's in your pack, which outlines the progress that we've made on the Communications and Behavioural Change Plan, and also and Recycle for Greater Manchester Communications Plan. And the period I'll be talking about is the period, so from October, November, December. The behavioural change plan is broken down into 5 sections, so I'm going to take each section in turn and just give a summary of what's in the report. So the first part is around waste prevention, and I'll just pick up the comments that Councillor Akbar made before about home composting. I've not detailed it in the report because we didn't do much activity around home composting over that time period. We're running a home composting campaign this year, and that will continue into next year. And that was mainly on request from the councils who had to stop some of their garden and food waste collections during the first lockdown, sort of March, April time. They really wanted to try and push home the message that residents can do a lot to compost their own garden waste in the back garden, and we should really try to promote that message. So we've provided all the councils with the comms teams with social media packs and information on home composting, and we'll continue to promote that. Obviously with home composting this time of year, small amount of activity that you can do in terms of composting leaves in the back garden, but what we'll start to do come the spring is start to really push that message when you can start to compost more. And so the other thing that we talked about this just previously is about food waste, and we are running food waste prevention across Greater Manchester, and again because of COVID and various things that happened last year, which had to be pushed back. Nationally, there was going to be a food waste action week in March last, pushed back to this March. So that's a good opportunity for us then to use that to promote a food waste prevention and recycling campaign across Greater Manchester. We're running that campaign in Oldham at the moment, and this is about combining the food waste prevention message, so how to prevent food waste from arising in the first place by only buying what you need, storing it properly, measuring out what you want to eat and using your leftovers, but then also reminding everybody in Greater Manchester that they do have access to their own food and garden waste recycling service. So whether it's cooked or raw or gone off, needs to go in that food and garden waste service. We've carried out a food waste survey across Oldham, and we'll be analysing those results, and they will help us to tailor that campaign going forward. What we're really trying to understand is why some people are still putting their food waste into their general waste bins. So I'll just run through onto the next section, which is the digital support. Most of the focus over October, November, December was around updating the Recycle for Greater Manchester website recycling centre pages. We've updated the recycling centre pages and improved the layout of them into an accordion style so that we can provide more information. There's obviously a lot more information on there now about the COVID measures on site, so we wanted a way to display that information so that people could get that information all in one place, along with the opening hours. And also what you can take to each of the. We're currently working on the contact page. What we're finding is that we're getting lots of questions on social media and in our mailbox, and a lot of those answers are on the website, so it's maybe that we need to reorganise some of the pages so the information is easier to find. Over Christmas we ran a Christmas campaign on our social media channels, and we provided social media to councils. The main message there was around paper and card and making sure that people were recycling all their wrapping paper and all their Christmas cards, and making sure that they were taking out those contaminants that we often find in the paper and card bin at this time of year, things like polystyrene, plastic wrapping, any glitter on any Christmas cards and wrapping paper. Just going on to education, so the education team, there's some stats there that show things that are running because we can't run the education tours at the education centre and the materials recovery facility along there. So they're doing quite well at running the virtual sessions for schools. And it just gives some details there at some of the different activities that they've been running with different schools. We're also running open, and obviously, unfortunately, at the moment, because schools are closed, we're now starting to target more community groups, and also remind people that there are resources on our website that are suitable for homeschooling. Our education officers were previously primary school teachers, so they've been building up a lot of the resources to make sure that they're curriculum focused and suitable for different key stages. There's also just going down to the reducing contamination and improving the quality of recycling. The main focus at the moment is on paper and card contamination, and there are campaigns running in Bolton, Salford and Tameside, and these involve the use of leaflets and bin stickers and vehicle livery and radio adverts and social media toolkits. And also, because of COVID, normally our campaigns would not just involve communications, but also engagement, like our stores do face-to-face events and go into community groups and do activities. And obviously we've not been able, so we hope to be able to do that later this year. There's a summary of the campaign that's been running in Bury, and also an update on the campaign that's been running in Trafford, which is around plastic bottle recycling. In terms of coming forward into this year, we're working with Keep Britain Tidy on a national nappy campaign, and that's around the fact that a lot of people, for some reason, think that nappies can be recycled and are putting them in the paper and card bin. So Keep Britain Tidy have been doing lots of research to actually survey people and actually ask them why they're putting nappies in the paper and card bin. And what they've found is quite surprising, is that lots of people think that nappies can be recycled because part of them are made out of paper. Obviously, we know that they can't be because they're a mixed material and have plastic in them. And also because they're very aware that in the media and in TV, they know that nappies going into landfill is a bad thing because it takes thousands and thousands of years to decompose. So I think in their minds, they think that they're doing the right thing by putting nappies in the paper and card bin. So they think that they, at some point, someone will take them out and recycle them. And I think that they don't want to put them in the general waste bin because they feel it's not the right thing to do. So Keep Britain Tidy are testing some campaign material with people who admit to putting nappies in the paper and card bin to try to see what would work better. And we hope to be able to roll something out, COVID permitting, in February. And they're going to roll this out nationally, and we'll be able to run this across Greater Manchester. So at the moment, we're looking at what that advertising might look like. We're thinking about vehicle livery and also some social media and digital advertising. In terms of increasing recycling at the house and waste recycling centres, during October and November and December, we were looking to roll out a couple of campaigns around battery recycling and also about mattress recycling because of the fact that we opened earlier on in the year a mattress recycling plant in Bolton. However, again, because of COVID and because the messaging in November was around the national lockdown and stay at home message, we've only been able to promote the household waste recycling centres being open only if we need to. So it's quite difficult to run those campaigns. So those campaigns have been put on hold. We're really trying to encourage the public to follow the COVID measures whilst on site and to wear a face covering and to only go if they need to go, which again is in place at the moment because of the lockdown. In terms of the sewers communication plan, sewers are making good progress on setting up the 3 reuse shops at the house and waste recycling centres. Again, they can't open at the moment while we're in this national lockdown, but they are working through the planning permission and ordering the units so that as soon as we can open the shops, we're hoping to have them open by the end of March. We've also been working on them in developing the community fund application form and all of the comms around that so that we can launch that on the 1st of April. And there's an update about the community fund later on in the agenda. In terms of monitoring and evaluation, I've attached the monthly social media dashboards for October and November. And then there's a budget report as well on that next section. And I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Chair, could I raise a question? Dave Lancaster.
Of course you can, Councillor Lancaster.
I wanted to know, have we got any examples of where you've done pilots on food collection in multi-stories or flats? Because it seems to me if we want to include the food waste increase, then we've got to do something in the flats, which currently in lots of flats there's no food collection whatsoever.
Yeah, we did actually run a trial in Salford. I think it must have been 2019. And they were low-rise flats. It was that recycling in flats is really difficult anyway, because you tend to find lots of contamination. And where you have lots of contamination, it's very difficult to introduce food waste because that just adds to the contamination problem. And we found that the bins weren't used properly. Where it did work successfully with the council, we introduced food waste container that was lockable with a very small aperture on the top of it, a very small round aperture. So all you could really fit in was a food waste bag.
Where was that?
I'll have to dig the details out. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll dig the details out and send them to you. I think with the flats, unfortunately, what you'd have to do is take a bespoke approach. So look at each individual block of flats separately, because they've all got their own sort of layout and their own issues and their own, you know, depending on the locations and where the bin stores are located, depends very much on whether you have a successful scheme or not. So I'm happy to send you some information, Councillor Lancaster, on the projects that we run in Salford.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. I've next got Councillor Besford, then Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Chair. Michelle, thanks for this report. I've got a few questions, if that's all right. Firstly, there's a section about online visits to the sessions for looking around the MRFs and 2.3. I think that's great to hear about those being started since September. I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can do or speak to our own comms team to try and drive more people to join those visits, because with those online sessions, I suspect that if more people knew about them, they would really be interested in finding out about what goes on there, because it's quite an interesting thing. Then I've got a few other questions about the appendix on the social media dashboards. Thank you for attaching those. I can see that in November there was a massive jump in people using the website. I'm assuming that that's because of the changes to lockdown restrictions and people wanting to check things out. But I just wanted to check that was the reason. And then I've got a couple of questions about your social media engagement figures. Would you be able to, after the meeting, let me know, or maybe even potentially include it in the notes for next time, what the cost is per interaction between social media engagement? Because I can see that we've got top level budget figures for your team, but what we haven't got is any kind of breakdown of how much it costs to actually engage a user. I'm specifically been looking at Instagram, where I can see your interactions are quite low, 16 and 9. I don't know though how that compares to similar authorities or similar social media sites. It feels to me that a lot of the content that you're putting out is really visual, which is great, you know, videos, images, that kind of stuff. So I would have thought that in the Instagram interaction would have been more than double figures. So I wonder. So those are my questions really about the reach of our social media outputs.
Okay, thanks. They're interesting questions. So the first one about online sessions and promoting them, absolutely welcome anything that you can do to raise awareness of that. So maybe I should send around, I don't know, I mean, do you use your own like Twitter channels and can you promote things that way? Because I'm happy to send you around anything that would help to raise awareness of these sessions.
Just coming back quickly on that, absolutely. Personally, I'd welcome being tagged in on Twitter into any of these kind of interactions. I'd also welcome receiving press releases that I can pass on to our comms team to make sure they're picked up. Okay, thanks for that. Right, I'll follow that up. In terms of the dashboard, I think you're right. In terms of the increase in November, we saw many more visits to the website, and that's probably reflected in the amount of chatter on Twitter, and also the questions we got in our communications mailbox asking if the house or waste recycling centres were open, because I think because they closed during the first lockdown, I think public perception was that a bit of a panic and oh no, are they going to close, and everybody was flocking to the website to find out if they're still open and what the restrictions were. So they, as you know, they are remaining open 7 days a week because they are listed as an essential public service on the government website. So I think you're right, that's what we read into those figures, and that was reflected in the questions that we were getting on Twitter at the time about are they open. So we very quickly had to update the front page of the website to remind people that they were open and give them all the information that they needed about the COVID restrictions on site. To take your point about Instagram, it is a very new channel. It's not something that
I think because we get a lot more questions and interaction on Twitter and Facebook than we do on Instagram, we tend to focus our time on Twitter and Facebook because that's where people are asking us questions. You're right about Instagram in that it lends itself really well to good quality photographs. And although we do share quite a bit, it's something that we've not got enough of, a library of. We've actually just purchased a new social media management tool called Falcon that will really help us to manage all of our channels much more easily. And what it will do is save officer time. So we're hoping that when we start to introduce that in the next couple of months, that will give us a bit more time to dedicate onto Instagram. One of the ideas that we've got coming up is that promoting the reuse shops would work quite well on Instagram because you can take really good quality photographs of items for sale and promote them through that channel. So we are hoping to increase the number of followers and increase the posts on Instagram going forward. I think it really is just a case of officer time and where we're spreading our time on Facebook and Twitter, but it is a good point and something that we've noted ourselves and that we are going to do something about. So thanks for that.
And there was just the final question about effectively the cost per interaction across all social media platforms.
Yeah, I'll have to do some digging about that. It's quite interesting. I think the new social media management tool might change that cost per interaction, and we're hoping that will streamline the process that we do and also the reporting we do. So I'll have to follow that up offline if that's okay, and give you some information after the meeting.
That would be great. Just I think so we can just map the spend against. I mean, if there's any other benchmarking as well across other authorities, that'd be really helpful. And I was interested to read about that new tool that you're using. I know some of the free tools that Facebook provide for like Creator Studio and things like that Facebook provide for Instagram and Facebook Analytics can give you some of that information. But I think it would be interesting to see how we're improving in that area, especially in the current climate. Interactivity and engagement online through social media is obviously a really important medium.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we shall move on to Councillor Warren.
Okay. I found it quite interesting actually that during the first report we were arguing that weekly food collections were not something that would be welcomed, and then when we got to this one there was a lot of food waste being placed in the grey bin. So I think that is something that should be explored properly as part of the consultation. But my actual questions regarding smart waste streams, and I know there's quite a lot of apps in development at the moment where people can kind of download an app and find out exactly where their waste has gone and how it's been treated. And I know it's being trialled at the moment in Birmingham. So I just wondered if there's any kind of information coming from Birmingham or any of the app developers on whether it is actually impacting the recycling streams and increasing the uptake of recycling as well. Thank you.
I'll have to find out some more about that app in Birmingham, and that's really interesting. We did used to have a Recycle for Greater Manchester bin app, but that simply told people when their bin was to be collected. But it is true that people do want to know more and more about what happens to the waste and want to be reassured that we are actually recycling it and want to know what happens to it. So I will find out some more about that app and review that and just provide some information at the next waste committee if that's okay.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good. And then finally, I think I've got Councillor Quinn who wanted to come in.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Michelle. Regarding the nappies, I was just wondering if it was worth putting in any sort of maybe leaflets at the maternity hospitals. Obviously, most of mine were born at St Mary's, but also with the extended producer responsibility, whether we could get lobbied that the manufacturers actually put it on in big letters. Do not, this has to go in your residual waste only, because it obviously costing us a packet. And on the contamination, I think it's going to come down to basically boots on the ground, Michelle, because I think we're now we've picked off all the low-hanging fruit, I think it is the knock on the door and actually telling people you are doing this wrong. And my worry is going forward, especially with paper and card. I think COVID has forced people who maybe have never shopped online to shop online, and we're going to get a lot more paper and card, and that's going to, you know, especially if it comes with packaging, it could lead us to more costs and more contamination. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Quinn. Did you want to come back on that, Michelle?
Yeah, in relation to EPR and the packaging, I know that some of the bigger, so Suez, for example, do lobby government and are talking to retail manufacturers about correct labelling on the packaging, because it is confusing. There's sort of all sorts of swirly logos that don't really mean anything at all, and there isn't very clear information on there about the fact that, number one, the packaging is generally plastic and that can't be recycled, and then number two, the actual, you know, what to do to dispose of your nappies properly. And you're right, it is a responsibility of that manufacturer. I think from their point of view, disposable nappies are not a very good thing for the environment, so it's quite tricky for them to move that forward and actually admit that these have to go in your general waste bin. So that's quite a difficult area, but I know that Suez are definitely talking to DEFRA and talking to manufacturers about that. And contamination in paper and card, definitely we've seen a shift in consumer behaviour because more people are at home, so creating more waste at home. And also the type of waste they're creating is going to be slightly different. So yes, there is going to be more paper and card. Contamination in the paper and card bin is still going to be a focus this coming year, and we are hoping, like Councillor Quinn says, to get boots on the ground, because we're dying to get out and about and start talking again properly to the public. So we're hoping to be able to do that next year, COVID permitting. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Michelle. If we're all done with the questions, if we're happy to note that report, we shall move on to item 7, which is contracts update, which Justin Lomax is taking us through.
Hello, Chair. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can. Good morning, everyone. Yes, this is the contracts update report. I'm going to take you through sections 1 to 4, and then over to section 5. We'll hand it to Paul Morgan for the van permit update, and then section 6, Michael Kelly will take you through the construction and works update. So to take you through the combined performance for the 2 contracts and give you some updates on the key issues, we're going to cover the April to September of last year, quarters 1 and 2, which at the time of writing of the reports was the position for verified data that was available. So if you take table 2.2, that breaks out the data for those 2 quarters combined, and it compares it to the previous year to give an idea of where we are in progress. The total arisings approaching 580,000 tonnes, which is around 15,000 tonnes lower than the same period last year. Obviously in quarter 1, COVID restrictions came in, and in lockdown 1 that changed the household waste levels and types, and also it closed the HWRCs for the first month of quarter 1 with a staged reopening over the following 2 months. So going into quarter 2, we did have full sites open again, but that quarter 1 period definitely had an impact on recycling. The quarter 2 position, however, did make progress on the quarter 1 position. So there were improvements, and that really got us back to a similar position, overall recycling rate that is similar to last year of around 48%. On the landfill diversion side, that was just less than 6% higher than last year. Just approaching 98% of landfill diversion for the combined 2 contracts, which is just under 35,000 tonnes less has gone to landfill than it did last year. For the HWRCs combined, the 20 sites across both contracts, the recycling rate was approaching 47%, which was about 4% higher than last year. And the combined landfill diversion for the landfill site, to the landfills from HWRCs, the diversion rate was up at almost 97%. So that was over 7% higher than the position was for last year. So to summarise that, overall, for the first half of 2021, the combined recycling rate just under 48%, and the diversion rate approaching 98%. Moving to section 2.7, that details the figures for the contamination of delivered recyclables. At the MRF, the materials recovery facility at Longley Lane in Sharston, that takes the commingled and pulpable material going in. For the commingled stream, it's separated at the machinery there, and the output has a contamination rate that is around 19%. That's 2% less than it was for quarter one. So slight improvement, but still significant. And then unfortunately for the WCA loads that are rejected at reception, where the contamination levels are too high to accept at the facility, you can see for those a very significant figure. It's still going up at 4.8 thousand tonnes. That's impacted there significantly by the global market issues and the outlet quality controls, and of course the COVID impacts over quarter one. Communications and collection schemes measures are in place to continue to attempt to address these issues and hopefully reduce that contamination as we go forward. Then moving down to section 3, health and safety. At the time of writing of the report for quarter 1 and 2, there were no more RIDORs since the last report. There was one RIDOR in quarter 1 that we reported at the last committee meeting, but there have been none in quarter 2. However, we do have an update in November. There were a further 2 updates on that. There were 2 incidents. One was a dangerous occurrence, a loading shovel failure at one of our transfer loading stations, and the other one was a long-term absence event following a back injury that happened at one of our Hwrc sites. So then taking you to section 4, the Hwrc closes and reopening, an overview of that position. As we said, and as reported in the previous committee report, the Hwrc is closed on the 24th of March in line with government's guidance, and then they were opened on a phased programme over the period from the 2nd of May until they resumed at full service again on the 30th of June. The Section 4.2 shows you the number of monthly Hwrc visits from May to July, obviously closed in April. So as they opened up between May and July, it peaked in the July month about 550,000 visits in that month across the sites. Then in August, on total, the monthly visits started to decline down to about just over 400,000, but in November. And also the graph gives you the position on the pre-COVID months as well, just to give you a comparison of what was going on that trend line. So if we look at the section 4.3, that shows you the daily visits and gives you the picture there, steady increase over the period from 2nd of May going to the year end, and then the trend line showing you the peak in July that we just referred to. We're finding now the daily visits is plateaued at weekends, showing the black lines, and the weekdays showing the blue lines that have declined. So weekdays dropping off a bit, and weekends showing about the same as we've seen before. And you can see in those date ranges there that lockdown 2 didn't seem to have an impact. There was no real increase in site use over that time. Then at 4.4, the tables just give you an idea of the overall tonnages. We show it from March to September to show the pre-COVID example, and it compares it with last year for the 2 contracts combined. The impacts on the tonnages of the Hwrc closure is shown there, and you can see the phase reopening as it goes up through May and onwards and returns to full capacity in July and August. So for both contracts, it shows that the data obviously shows the drop in May, the phase reopened in the July, returned to comparable levels from last year, and when combined, it looks like they're running at a lower overall level than the previous year. Current forecasts are giving us an idea that it looks like it's going to be an overall throughput reduction of around 50,000 tonnes compared to 1920 levels. So happy to take any questions on that information.
Thanks, Justin. I've got Councillor Adshead has expressed that he'd like to ask a question.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just on the household recycling centres. Obviously, I'm new to the committee, but I've been involved with that on my own authority. As opposition and now exec member. So I get a lot of queries from people, well, not a lot, I get a number of queries I've had. Actually, I about the restrictions and so forth, and it's like a hard one to actually understand myself. Obviously, we see locally people advertise like you advert like man and van available for anything hire, so people move stuff between houses and that sort of thing, and do drops for people, and then in the past they've actually also sort of where something's too big for someone, they've actually helped them to take stuff to the recycling centres. Obviously they can't do that now, so I mean I can see what they're saying. It's a very difficult one to manage. How do, because they themselves are not a waste producer or a builder or anything like that, they're simply providing a service to a resident, but it's actually how we I can see the impossibility of actually trying to manage that in a reasonable way on the database. So it's a it's a real struggle, that one, to actually. I haven't got proper answers to that one when it's been put to me, except to say we got no rules. But it's actually trying to get justification behind that. That might help. If you could please, Chair, thank you.
If you want to answer that one, Justin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I've said it's yeah. So to give you the background on that, obviously the trade waste prevention scheme is there to prevent commercial material coming in. People who have exchanged money for those services, or for the waste removal, or for the production of those. So if someone's done any work in the house, that material would be considered as commercial. For the example you're giving there, anyone with trade waste, they can go to the weighbridge and they can pay for that material to be properly handled and disposed of, and that's what they should do, whether that material is derived from a job within the house that was paid for, or whether the movement of the waste was paid for. And otherwise, for that, where members of public want to get rid of their materials, obviously they've got the household waste bin, they've also got the bulky waste collection services that the local authorities offer. And equally, if they did have someone who had a vehicle and they wanted to travel with them and deliver that material, they can do that. But ultimately, yes, it's the exchange of waste for commercial gain that we want to prevent entering into our HWRC sites. Equally,
it's just, sorry,
sorry.
Just going to finish there. So I think it's finished.
No, please go on. Yes.
I mean, that was obviously what I took. Not so much all. I understand completely trade waste and all that sort of thing. Also, it's like you might get a household with like a big cupboard or a mattress or something like that. They obviously can't get into a car or something like that, so they obviously want to. This is somebody with a van for like a fiver will go in with them. Obviously, that's not permitted. But I mean, so it's actually has that sort of thing actually been considered and so forth? Because it's you can see obviously. I mean, I did see one really bad example of somebody actually trying to do it, and I still kept the photograph of it, of somebody going down the main road with a mattress sort of tried to be tied to the top of a car, which is highly dangerous in that sense of it. But you can obviously see that you can't really get it in a car. So I mean, it's like in that sense, it's actually how people could actually get them to a household recycling centre. Some of the mattresses are really, really heavy. So it's actually, you can see obviously if there's somebody available who sort of simply, they can actually use the services of someone to actually transport it. So that person wouldn't be the producer of the waste or anything like that. They simply just give facilities, so a person with a council tax bill can actually use them to actually transport something that they couldn't otherwise get there, whether that's a cupboard or a mattress or something like that. That's simply not. I'm trying to. Oh, that's you're following that. Oh, sorry, keep going out there. It's just for them trying to do things that are difficult for them without a van or something. Thank you.
Yes, in those circumstances, I mean, yeah, obviously there is the one option for people who would hire a van themselves and take it down there. And for that, the next section actually that Paul is going to introduce will cover what they can do to hire a van and then get a van permit, and a genuine resident with their own domestic material could go down to one of our sites and deliver that. Where again, let's see the example where if they did pay someone to help them do that, I'm afraid that comes into the commercial category, and that is how it is really the best way if a resident wished to pay for the collection of a mattress or fridge or some bulky item. Really, they should go to the local authority to arrange that, and they can arrange a collection from their home. They don't have to start trying to, like you say, tie it to the top of a car or anything unsafe like that. They can actually get the local authority to safely remove it for them.
Okay, thank you for that, Justin. I have got Councillor Besford and then Councillor Quinn.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one question on this and then one question on the permits, but I know we're going to hear from Paul next, so should I wait until after Paul's present on that?
Yeah, please, that would be great.
I think I just firstly like to just to pass on my thanks. Having visited a couple of sites over the Christmas period and seeing how busy they were, I just thought that the staff on site, the Suez team, were just doing really well at managing the traffic and trying to keep things going into place. But I've got a bit of a question really about how many incidents you might have come up against complaints around social distancing or any breaches of the rules. When the times when I was there, things looked all right, but I have had, and I know a few other members have also picked up on this, a few comments from people about potential breaches of social distancing rules. I wonder if you can just give a bit of a comment on anything that you've picked up on that.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Councillor. It's good to hear you've witnessed good practice and you've had a good experience on those sites. Yes, that's great news. In the social distancing, we have had complaints from members of the public. Indeed, we have on the usual levels of, should we say, face masks and keeping distance away from each other. What we do on the sites is encourage social distancing. We have the members of staff are trained to keep that distance when they're interacting with the public where they have to. The encouragement on the site is the face space distance message on there to say hands face space to try and keep people aware that it is the social distancing is as important on these sites as anywhere else. We'd encourage members of the public to behave as they should do in supermarkets or car parks, wherever they may be, on their essential business, to say keep your 2 meters away from people, minimize interaction, give people space. Obviously on the sites you do have the piers and you have the gates and at the entry to them, where we would like people to maintain the distance from each other and from our staff and wear masks when on site. And the message has gone out there to encourage them to wear masks whilst they're on site. Yes, we do still get complaints of people not doing that, and where we can encourage them, we always do. But unfortunately, in certain cases, yeah, the public aren't keeping far enough away from each other, or they're not wearing masks. And certainly, we'd like to get that message out that we'd like them to treat the behaviour on a household waste recycling centre as they would do if they were walking around the supermarket, walking through the car park of a supermarket, where they would give each other adequate space and keep a face mask on at all times.
Thank you. I just wonder whether that point you've made about the supermarket being the key thing, as you go into any of the household waste and recycling sites, there's a lot of information about all kinds of permits and what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. I wonder whether there's anything we can pick up that would push things like wearing a mask further forwards or in a more prominent position for the public to come in, because I think that key point about wearing a mask, even though it's outside, might just help people being a bit more aware of some of these measures and restrictions.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I'll take that point away and see what can be done with that. Yes.
I think David wanted to come in on this particular question as well. If I can invite him.
Yeah, it's just in response to Councillor Besford, you asked about sort of complaint levels. So I think just to put it in context, in the month of December, we had 434,000 visits to the HWRCs. And the level of complaint that Suez have picked up on social distancing or control measures on site is less than 20. So it's just to put it in context for you. There is an extremely high volume of visitors going through the sites, but the level of concern which is being raised about social distancing or COVID controls on site is very, very low.
That's really good to hear. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that, David. Councillor Quinn, I think you wanted to jump in as well now.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Cheers. Thanks, Justin. Couple of questions, couple of points, please. I know I've just mentioned I was at Cemetery Road in Bury, and it was the public. I think there was 2 of us that were wearing masks, and people were just sort of couldn't wait to recycle. I think there was only a few of us who were actually waiting till you could get access by keeping a 2 meter space to the skips, Justin. So that was that one. On the vans, this has been a real success for us. And let's not forget, these people were ripping us off, because and I've said this before, Chair, if you're having an extension bill, when you get that quote, somewhere in what you pay will be a bill for getting rid of that rubbish. And we know what some road builders have been up to. And we do know that we've actually seen, our staff have seen them switching number plates outside. So it's been a great success, and it's been a cost saving to the residents of Greater Manchester. Final question, please, Justin. You know, the loads that are rejected, the pulpables, does that go to landfill, or can we incinerate them? Because if it's going to landfill, and you know, we're just burying waste, whereas if we could incinerate it, then at least we could get some electricity from it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Thanks, Councillor Quinn. Yes, in relation to the pulpables, yes, that well, to any rejects from the recyclable streams that can't be rescued from that pile would end up into the materials that would go in for production of these solid recovered fuel. So predominantly that material would be aimed at going off into that process and down to the combined heat and power. So yes, it would be recovered and would be diverted from landfill in most instances. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that, Justin. If there's no further questions, we're happy to note that report. I don't hear anyone dissenting. So move on to
Chair, there's a section on the permit, Hwrc permit system, which Paul was going to cover in that report.
Then let's get Paul to do his bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David. The committee has previously considered a report last meeting about the introduction of the permit scheme, and they can be reassured that in the intervening time a lot of work has gone on to scope out the permit scheme and to develop how it will look and how it will work. Within the report at 5.2, some bullets basically of some of the principles that the permit scheme will operate against, that we will then be testing out when we do some sort of testing before it goes live in June. I think the key principles to note are that essentially a van owner will only be able to register one van per household, and that van will only be allowed to be registered once, so it can't be registered to multiple households. The functionality within the system, we're able to do cross-referencing to be able to check both addresses and van registrations. And you know, if someone sells a van partway through the year, they'll be able to transfer their remaining permit allocation to the new van and things like that. To cover Councillor Adshead's point, we're also taking into account that people do hire vans for various reasons, for weekends if they're doing some particular work at home. So householders will be able to register those vans and have the allocation given to them as well. It may be to start with that they have to register it on a daily basis, which if that's just a Saturday and a Sunday isn't too much of a trouble. But if you're a trader hiring a van and you've got it for 2 weeks, registering it every day for those 14 days hopefully will dissuade you from using this particular means of waste disposal. And finally, the process for registration we see as wanting to be very easy. So if someone turns up with a van, didn't realise they need a permit, they will be able to effectively register on the curbside, as long as they can provide some evidence of an address and get access to the site within a relatively short period of time. That will then require a manual check of the evidence uploaded, so that we can check they have uploaded their council tax bill rather than a picture of their dog as the evidence for their address. So that's one of the key controls, so that it is quick and easy for people, but it will be manual inputs. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so Westford, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested, Paul, to explore this idea about hiring vans and how that's going to work. It looks to me from the notes, I wonder if you can clarify, that the recommendation is if an individual hires a van, it's then that individual's responsibility to get a permit. But it would seem to me that that most individuals aren't going to know about a van permit scheme, especially if you're having to hire a van because you haven't got one. Is there an opportunity for hire companies to deal with those permits on behalf of individuals, so that when you're picking up your van, in the same way you might pay for excess mileage, you would also buy a permit? And also, do you have an idea of cost for both individual day permits and the general permits yet?
On the cost issue, they will be at no charge for the use of the HWRC, because they are for householders for their own personal household waste, but they just happen to have a van and not a car. So obviously, if you're a trader, you'll just be stopped from using the site. In terms of the van hire companies. We have had some correspondence, particularly from one van hire company in Bolton, who believes this is going to stop them being able to hire vans out at all. That's not the case. If a van hire company wants to take on the role, I don't think we'd stop them, but they would have to have some evidence that the householder lives within Greater Manchester, a copy of the council tax bill, which is why we're trying to streamline the process so that if they do find out they need a permit, hopefully just parking up with a cup of coffee and a lay-by the time they've drunk the coffee, their permit will have come through on their phone, will be the case. And also, I think we're also planning a significant marketing campaign beforehand, sort of in the run-up to implementation, give leaflets to van drivers as they visit the site, and also provide leafleting to local van hire companies so that perhaps as part of the hire agreement, they can tell the hirer that if you're planning to use a household waste site, you do need to get a permit. But we are trying to make it as easy as possible in the first instance, but then have the back office system so we can weed out some people who are trying to work their way around the system.
Thanks for that. I just sorry, Chair, just to follow up on that. I think the issue around people hiring vans, because you're going to need some kind of proof of where you live. If I'm going to the tip, I might not have my council tax bill there. Whereas certainly when I'm hiring a car, hiring a van, you need to bring things like proof of ID and stuff like that. So I think you're right just to do a marketing campaign, but I think the priority should be focused on making sure that at the point when you hire the vehicle, the vehicle company that you're hiring from says you'll need a permit, and to do that you need to do these things. Because I could easily see, because I know I've done it myself, hiring a van, don't think anything about it, put a load of stuff in the back, drive it to the tip, and then suddenly I've not got my council tax bill and I've got to drive it home again, and that's going to be frustrating.
I certainly take your point. I think actually, if that's the case, you'll have your hire agreement with you as well, and hopefully you'll have a driver's license, and we need to work out some of the details of what evidence we want to upload, because actually your driving license should have your home address on it, your permanent home address, so you could perhaps upload a picture of that as well, but we're working out the fine details of that. But if you're turning up at the site, you've hired a van, hopefully you've got the van hire agreement as well as an extra line of evidence to provide. And you know, it may well be that we'll be happy to accept a photograph of that as part of that evidence as well, which could be uploaded from your mobile phone.
Thank you.
I know whenever I've hired certainly cars that they require that you have the documentation on the vehicle at all times anyway, in case of any issues. But I think the general principle of this scheme is to enable those that are resident and paying council tax within the 9 authorities to be able to access the refuse facility that they have rightly paid for, and to stop those that are taking advantage of the system costing those taxpayers more money. And I think this goes a long way, and I'm sure there'll be quirks within the system which will need some looking at and some ironing out, but I think it's a really good starting place.
Yes, there will be. Thank you.
So if there's no further questions, we shall move on to. Oh, have I got one? Have I got Councillor Ashead? I think.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's actually not on permits. It's actually on this household recycling centres. In my own borough, and in my own ward, we actually have one on the Chester Road in Stretford there, and it's just around the corner from obviously residential areas. I don't know about where all household recycling centres are, but simply one there. And on occasions, we get some residents when at particular points a year, they might generate a lot of rubbish. Their general rubbish too much to go into their grey bin, so they tend to walk round to the site round the corner. I understand that as long as that should be fine, but sometimes some of the operatives on those sites don't always accept that they're actually just residents. Sometimes try to sort of suggest on 1 or 2 occasions that they were like traders, whereas clearly you've got a very mature person carrying a couple of black bin bags down the corner from where they live. Obviously, no, they pass them to the bloke, and the chap will actually should take them through, but that isn't always the case. So it's just a query on that one. It's obviously, I don't think it could be happening in every site, because not every site is near residential areas, but it is. On this one here in my own ward, it's a couple of queries that I have on occasions where they've gone round there to take a couple of black bin bags, and the chaps on this scheme have actually been quite funny with them.
Are you able to answer this, Justin? Paul. It's
yes, I think I could pick this up as I'm
yeah.
to be here. The walk-ins of waste is an issue that's currently being looked at, because we have had queries from, for example, allotment associations that are located close to the HWRCs, and it makes sense in some cases, or is easier to walk the waste across. Certainly at the time of COVID, SEWRs have taken the view is that they don't want to accept waste handed over at the gate because of the infection risk, but I think in ordinary times it is acceptable for someone to walk up if they've not got the ability to drive in, to hand the waste over to the operative, that the site staff, but at the moment it's something that's been suspended.
Thank you, Chair. Just in this case, it was an elderly resident who simply don't drive, but they simply just literally around the corner from the centre. But that's helpful. So for the normal times, they should accept that. So obviously, if there are any problems, I can actually take that up with. I'm not sure who will take it up with.
I think Justin wanted to come in as well on that item, that point.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to add to the point that Paul made there. Yes, in normal times, the way we would ask anyone who would approach the site as a pedestrian, they would not try and enter the site. They would get to the gate of the site and alert the member of staff who would be on the meet and greet duties, so that they could safely get those materials from them and obviously dispose of them correctly, so the member of public doesn't have to walk into the site, and equally so that waste isn't left at the gate unattended, that it needs to be handed over to the member of staff, or at least left where the member of staff can pick it up and they're aware of what's in there as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Justin. We shall move on now to item. Who's taking us through that? My agenda's just disappeared for a second.
So
Steve, what have we got?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair. So I will. I'll just say a couple of words of introduction, and then I'll hand over to Lindsay Keach, who will give a bit more detail and answer any difficult questions on my behalf. So the just in terms of context, so the paper's here for noting and for comments around the 2020-21 forecast position, and then the budget for 2021-22, both revenue and capital budget, and the reserves position on the proposed prices for trade waste. So we're seeking members' comments on those, and happy to take any questions on those areas. The process after this is that subject to any issues being raised today, then the proposed budgets will be contained in the full suite of budget proposals that go forward to the combined authority meeting in February, on the 12th of February, and then to be approved there, which will then inform budgets, the levies that the districts will pay. Just a couple of things to draw out. So to 2021, you'll have seen the background to this, and we remain in a fairly volatile world around tonnage, especially going into another lockdown, but particularly grateful for the work the team have done in managing within these times, and managing the budget, so that the forecast is to deliver break even and to be able to return funding back to districts to support them with their challenges. And in 21-22 proposals, the charge to districts by a small amount, 2.9%, returning 4.8 million to districts, again recognising both the challenges that continue on the finances within the districts, and also the settling down of the new contract. Final thing I just want to say is around reserves. So I'm expected to present to the combined authority my view on the adequacy of reserves as the Section 73 officer for the combined authority overall, and just to give assurance to this committee that I am assured that the reserves going into 21-22 are adequate. There has been a reduction in year, which reflects that return of some of those monies back to districts, but at 32 million level of reserves, that is adequate, and there will be some further work done in year in 21-22 to see if any further reserves can be up. But at the moment, because of the risk around tonnage, the fallout around issues like Brexit, we are not handing any further funding back or committing to any of that yet, but there is adequate reserves to manage those risks and to maintain a prudent level for the waste services. So that's all I was going to say. I'll hand over to Lindsay just to add details, and between us we'll answer any questions you've got. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Does anyone want to ask any questions? No one's indicated on chat, but if anyone wants to sing up.
Chair, my chat's just gone off, sorry. I don't
Okay.
know why, it does this case. Yeah, it's just it's actually on that. I was just...
This time is running on, Councillor Adhead.
Yeah, it is very fast, just actually on that one. Obviously, with people homeworking and so forth, and actually being furloughed, obviously a lot more people at home. So I was surprised to sort of see that there might be some rebates to authorities, given there's an extra increase in the amount of waste that people produce at home. So could I have perhaps someone give me briefly just explain that, if possible? Thank you.
Who's going to pick that up?
Yeah. Lindsay, you okay picking that up?
Can I answer that? So in the current year budget, so for the 2021 budget, we had sums of money in for no deal Brexit, as well as during the building works for higher disposal costs. Those have both been taken out of next year's budget, which is why it's partly driven the reduction. So even though there's extra costs associated with higher tonnage levels, because we've taken those costs out, it's brought the total levy down.
Thank you for that. Councillor Garrido wants to come in at this stage as well.
Yeah, just quickly, I might have missed it, but you did mention about the amount of money that's been returned to local authorities. How much has been refunded? Could you tell me where I can find those figures?
Yeah, Councillor Garrido, on section 2.1, there's the refund of levy to districts of 26.951 million. So that includes 20 million that's already been agreed by the CA, and that has been returned to districts already. There's then a proposal to refund. It would be a further 6.951 million at this stage, but that's based on tonnages that districts deliver. So we've made a proposal to ensure that no district has to be where you're paying for extra tonnages. So the 5.1 million of levy adjustment that districts have to pay, we've made a proposal to ensure that no district is in a net paying position, which would require us to refund further reserves. That is built into this forecast for 2021.
So have you got the breakdown per district?
The return of reserves I haven't included in the report, a breakdown per district, but we can provide that information.
That would be useful, I think, if we could have that breakdown.
Okay. If there's no further questions, was there anything more you wanted to add, Steve or Lindsay?
I mean, I can talk through the report if members would find that helpful, but assuming that members have already read the report and some questions going forward. Yeah.
I'm not hearing from anyone. If we're all content, I think that the summary has done the job. It hasn't elicited any further questioning. So if we're all happy to note those contents, and there are several recommendations of noting the so the first one is noting the proposed trade waste rate of £102.30 and 114.83 to 22-23 to allow forward planning by the districts. Note the capital programme for 21-22 as set out in the Appendix A of the report. Note the budget and levy for 21-22 of 162.4 million, which is a 2.9% decrease, and note the risk position set out in the balances, strategy and reserves. So if we're all content with that, anyone shout up that's not? I think we are noted on that. Thank you so much for the work that you do on that. It's a very comprehensive report. And moving on to item 9, which is our bio-waste management. Paul Morgan shall be taking us through that, I think. Yes, Paul's there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see and hear me. This report is for noting, and that there is a report in greater detail in Part B. As has been discussed and at the start of the meeting, bio-waste is obviously a topic of great interest to the committee, and forms an important part of the recycling services we offer. As the report states, we have a number of contracts managing our bio-waste through Suez and outside of the Suez contract, and the way we manage that bio-waste is also the focus of attention of the National Waste Strategy, as we've discussed. So within this report, we put forward the proposal that the service starts to develop a strategy on how to deal with bio-waste once we know what the government is likely to recommend that we do with it, and manage those contracts in the future. We certainly know through the work we've done that the collection of separate weekly food waste is going to be a significant increase in cost, which the government has indicated it will cover, but that will lead to additional treatment or different treatment options which we need to consider. So with the agreement of the committee and with some further detail in Part B, we intend to develop a bio-waste strategy for the management of that material in the future. So I think at this moment in time, that's as much I'll say on that until we get to later on.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any questions for this part of the agenda, bearing in mind that we have a Part B? I can't see anyone indicating, so I think that they're saving it for the other part of the meeting. Thank you for that, Paul. So if we're happy to note that the contents of that part of the report, we shall come to item number 10, which is dates and times of future meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for the 14th of April at 9:30. I'm not sure whether we perhaps want to see if we can push that back to 10, just bearing in mind we all did have some difficulties getting in on a timely fashion today. There were several members that were stuck in the wrong part of the room that needed help and assistance to get through. So I don't know whether we can have a think about the timings around that, so that we can get in and have an orderly and prompt start time, as it were. We all like starting promptly, and I think that we all struggled a little this morning on that. But the 14th of April is the next meeting date for noting. Item 11 is exclusion of the press and the public for our part 2. So if you have been joining us, press and public, thank you for your attendance. We'll move to the confidential part of the meeting shortly, and can we ask for the live stream to be discontinued?